On this day, November 29, 1872, the U.S. 1st Cavalry arrived at a Modoc camp near the Lost River. Their orders were to disarm the band led by Captain Jack and force them back to the Klamath Reservation. The Modoc were not seen at the time to be a military threat. They were a group of families, men, women, and children, and elders who left the reservation because of its brutal conditions. Their only demand was a small tract of land in their original territory so they could live in peace. When the cavalry arrived that morning, they demanded their weapons, and then a scuffle broke out between a lieutenant and a Modoc warrior named Scarface Charlie. Shots were fired, and this would mark the beginning of the Modoc War. The Modoc immediately retreated to the lava beds, a natural fortress of rock and caves. And there, with only 53 warriors, they were able to hold off the U.S. forces of over 1,000 soldiers. And these 53 warriors, who were fighting to protect their families and stay in their homelands, punished the U.S. Army. And this campaign would become one of the costliest of the so-called Indian Wars. And the human cost for the Army was also severe. By the end of the war, the U.S. suffered 73 casualties and over 100 wounded. In contrast, the Modoc sustained just a handful of combat casualties. The Modoc, using their homelands to their advantage, fought a brilliant guerrilla war. Eventually, however, without supplies, they were forced to surrender. Captain Jack, Squanch John, Boston Charlie, and Black Jim were then brought before a military court. They were charged with violating the laws of war. All 4 men were convicted and they were sentenced to death. On October 3rd, 1873, they were executed and hanged at Fort Klamath. And thousands of people would travel from all over to witness this execution. Also, family members of the Modoc were forced to attend and watch their kinsmen die. But the violations continued even after death. Following the hanging, their graves were dug up, the men were decapitated, and their skulls were sent back to Washington, D.C. This was part of a government collection of some 4,000 indigenous skulls that were used in some type of pseudo-scientific study. The skulls of Captain Jack, Squanch John, Boston Charlie, and Black Jim remained as part of this federal collection for over 100 years. In 1994, the skulls were finally repatriated. However, this repatriation remained incomplete. The skulls were returned, but the remains and items belonging to the 4 men remained in the hands of Oregon institutions. Finally, in October of this year, just a month ago, the Modoc and the Klamath were able to bring their relatives back home. The remains of the 4 men and items belonging to them that were held at the Fort Klamath Museum were all returned.